everybody, and welcome to Self-Help FAQ, the YouTube channel. I'm Barb, your host, and this is our final video in the 12-video series on boundaries and the many things related to boundaries. Now it's time for me to bring this all together for you. So let's get started. So over the past few videos, we've talked about a lot of things related to boundaries. We've talked about learning to trust yourself again, noticing patterns instead of explaining them away, understanding where your energy is going, and recognizing when something doesn't feel right, even if you can't fully explain why. We've also talked about staying too long in relationships, being too nice, and what happens when you finally start raising your standards. And if you've been following along, you might have noticed something. All of these things are connected. They're not separate topics. They're all part of the same shift. And that shift is this. You're learning how to protect your life in a way that actually allows you to build something better. And that brings me back to something very simple. Let me start with a concrete example. When I look out at my backyard, I see a fence around it. And we've talked about this before in a previous video, how it gives privacy and protection. And I will put a link up on the screen to that fence video on boundaries. And those things matter because without that fence, there wouldn't be anything separating what belongs there from what doesn't. But as I was looking at it more recently, I realized something that I hadn't thought about before. That fence doesn't just keep things out. It creates space, a defined space, where something can exist without being constantly interrupted. And when you think about it, this changes the way you relate to that space. Because when something feels protected, you treat it differently. You're more careful with it. You pay more attention to it. You put more energy into it, because you know it's not just going to get disrupted the next day. But there's another layer to this that matters just as much, because having a fence just isn't enough. You have to decide just what you're going to allow inside it. You still have to decide what stays, what belongs, and what doesn't. And that's where self-respect comes in. Self-respect isn't just a feeling. It's not just something you say that you have. It shows up in your decisions, in what you allow, in what you overlook, and what you continue to tolerate, even when something in you knows something doesn't feel right. Like letting something go on longer than it should because you don't want to deal with it, or explaining something away even though you've seen the pattern already, or telling yourself it's not that bad, even though you can see that it is. That's the gap between having boundaries and actually honoring them. And that gap is either where self-respect holds or slowly wears down. So once that space is actually protected, something else becomes possible. You're not just reacting anymore. You're not just trying to manage what comes in. You can actually start choosing what you want to build inside. And that's where things really begin to change. This could look like spending more time in relationships that make you feel calm instead of always trying to figure things out, or reconnecting with things you enjoy but just didn't have the energy for before. Or creating routines that make you feel more stable instead of unpredictable. Or just giving yourself space to think clearly, without noise, without pressure, without constant reaction. At first, those things might feel small, but they don't stay small, because when something has space and attention and consistency, it grows. And over time, those small changes start shaping your life in something that feels completely different. When self-respect becomes something you actually act on, your decisions start to change. Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but in smaller, earlier moments, like you might start noticing something sooner instead of brushing it off. Maybe you start speaking up a little earlier instead of waiting until you become frustrated. Maybe you step back from something instead of trying to fix it yet again. Or it could be simply recognizing this doesn't belong in my life and actually meaning it. And those moments might seem small, but they're actually not, because those are the moments when your life actually shifts. Not because things change overnight, because you stopped allowing things to continue as they always have. And this is where it really matters, because if self-respect isn't there consistently, things don't just stay the same. They start shifting in the wrong direction. This could look like knowing something doesn't feel right, but letting it continue anyway. Maybe it's you see a pattern, but then you say to yourself, maybe it's different this time. Or maybe you feel a sense of discomfort, but you push it aside because it feels easier in the moment. And none of these moments feel big at the time. They feel small, manageable, and easy to explain. But over time, they add up. And what starts happening is your space does not feel clear anymore. It doesn't feel stable, and you start reacting again, adjusting again, and second guessing again. And little by little, you stop feeling like yourself in your own life. Not because something dramatic happened, but because of what was allowed to stay. However, if you let the space be protected, something else happens. You don't just feel better, you start building differently. Because now your time, your energy, and your attention are no longer being pulled in directions that don't fit you. And that creates something people don't even realize they're missing. It creates capacity. Capacity to think more clearly, capacity to follow through on things, and the capacity to stay focused on what really matters to you. This might mean like finally having the mental capacity to make decisions without second guessing yourself, or having the consistency to work towards something over time instead of constantly starting over. It might look like becoming more confident in your direction, not because everything is certain, but because you're not being pulled off course anymore. It might even look like something very simple, very different. You wake up, your life is calmer and quieter and more stable. Not because nothing is happening, but because what is happening actually fits you. And from there, you can build things that require consistency and they require focus. And it could be things that require you to stay more aligned with yourself over time. And that's when your life starts taking shape in a way that feels intentional instead of reactive. And over time, this changes things, not all at once, but steadily in a way that actually lasts. So when you step back and actually look at all of this, it's not really about boundaries on their own. It's about what those boundaries are protecting. It's about realizing that your life is that space. And whether you realize it or not, something is always being allowed inside it. Something is always growing there. The question is, are you choosing it, or is it just happening based on what you're willing to tolerate? Because over time, what's inside that space becomes your life. Not one big moment, but gradually over time, in small decisions, in small allowances, in what you let stay and what you don't. And that's why this matters so much. Not for just one situation, not for just one relationship, but for the whole direction your life takes over time. And if you get one takeaway from all of this, it's this: boundaries create the space, but self-respect determines what fills it. And once you understand that, you don't look at your life the same way anymore. So, if you're thinking about where to go to from here, I've got a couple of journal questions for you. You can use one or both. And the questions are: what do I want to start building in my life now that I'm protecting my space? So that's a future forward. Second question is, what deserves more space, time, and energy in my life going forward? So that's looking at things maybe you didn't spend so much time with before, and now you want to give more energy to it. Or even things you've been thinking about, giving more energy towards. So if those questions feel a little too big to answer, how do you answer such questions? I can give you a couple of phrases that can help. The first one is, I want more, or you can also use the next one, which is, I want to build a life where, and answer that way. And some examples could be, I want more calm in my relationships, or I want to build a life where I feel more like myself. Or maybe, I want more time for things that actually matter to me. Or you can say, I want to build something I'm proud of. Okay, so this brings us to the conclusion of our 12 video series on boundaries. If you've been following the series from the beginning, then now you can see how all of this connects. From learning to trust yourself again, to recognizing patterns, to setting boundaries and raising your standards, and now understanding what you're actually building with all of that. This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming more aware, more intentional, and more aligned with what actually works for you. And over time, that changes everything. So thank you for being here for the series, and stay tuned for my next video, which will be a channel check-in, where you can find out what's in store for this channel for the next 6 months. Thanks again for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and bye for now.